He wrote the words that helped shape a nation: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States, was a visionary thinker, a founding father, and the principal author of the Declaration of Independence. But behind the legacy lies a man of contradictions, a champion of freedom who owned slaves, a believer in limited government who expanded presidential power. In this video, we explore the complex life and lasting influence of Thomas Jefferson, the ideals he fought for, the controversies he left behind, and the mark he carved into American history. The sun rose over the rolling hills of Virginia, casting golden rays across the sprawling plantation known as Shadwell. It was April 13, 1743. And on this day, 1743, and on this day, Peter Jefferson, a man whose strength and resolve were matched only by his ambition, welcomed his third child into the world. A boy who would come to shape the destiny of a fledgling nation, named after both his father and grandfather. Thomas Jefferson entered the world amidst an era of profound transformation. Shadwell, nestled along the Rivanna River, was more than just land. It was a symbol of prosperity and opportunity. For Peter Jefferson, the estate represented decades of hard work and strategic alliances. He had risen from modest beginnings to become one of the most respected figures in colonial Virginia. A surveyor by trade, he mapped vast swaths of uncharted territory, earning not only wealth but also the admiration of those around him. Yet, despite his success, Peter's life was far from idyllic. His wife, Jane Randolph Jefferson, hailed from one of Virginia's oldest families, bringing with her a legacy of aristocracy that often clashed with Peter's rugged pragmatism. Their marriage, while fruitful, carried undercurrents of tension as two worlds converged under one roof. Young Thomas grew up in this dichotomy, surrounded by the comforts of privilege, yet acutely aware of the challenges faced by those less fortunate. From an early age, he displayed a precocious intellect, devouring books brought home by his father and engaging in debates with anyone willing to listen. The family library, though modest compared to what Jefferson would later amass, became his sanctuary, a place where imagination soared beyond the confines of rural Virginia. Education played a pivotal role in shaping young Thomas's worldview. At 5 years old, he began formal schooling under the tutelage of Reverend William Douglas, a Scottish clergyman known for his rigorous curriculum. Under Douglas's guidance, Jefferson mastered Latin, Greek, and French, laying the foundation for a lifelong love of languages and literature. By the time he turned 9, he had already read works by Cicero, Homer, and Virgil, absorbing their timeless wisdom like a sponge. These ancient texts instilled in him a deep appreciation for philosophy, governance, and the pursuit of knowledge, themes that would define his career. Yet, Jefferson's formative years were not without hardship. When he was 14, tragedy struck when his father succumbed to a sudden illness. Overnight, the responsibilities of managing Shadwell fell upon Thomas's shoulders. Though still a teenager, he demonstrated remarkable maturity, overseeing the plantation's operations with a steady hand. This period of adversity taught him invaluable lessons about leadership, resilience, and the complexities of human relationships. It also deepened his empathy for others, particularly those enduring struggles similar to his own. As Jefferson navigated adolescence, his mother, Jane, remained a constant source of support. While she may have lacked her husband's boldness, her grace and poise left an indelible mark on her son. She encouraged his intellectual pursuits, often accompanying him to Williamsburg, where they frequented bookstores and attended lectures at the College of William and Mary. These trips exposed Jefferson to a broader spectrum of ideas, fueling his curiosity about science, politics, and religion. In Williamsburg, he encountered influential thinkers such as George Wythe, a legal scholar who recognized Jefferson's potential and became a mentor to him. Wythe introduced Jefferson to Enlightenment ideals espoused by philosophers like John Locke and Montesquieu, igniting within him a passion for liberty and justice. By the time Jefferson enrolled at the College of William and Mary in 1760, he was no ordinary student. Standing tall with piercing blue eyes and auburn hair, he commanded attention wherever he went. His classmates admired his wit and charm, while professors marveled at his insatiable appetite for learning. During his studies, Jefferson immersed himself in law, history, mathematics, and natural sciences, emerging as one of the brightest minds of his generation. But academia alone could not satisfy his hunger for understanding. He spent countless hours observing the workings of colonial society, taking note of its virtues and flaws alike. What he saw troubled him deeply: the institution of slavery, economic inequality, and political corruption all gnawed at his conscience. Jefferson's experiences during these formative years planted the seeds of revolution, not merely against British rule, but against any system that stifled individual freedom or perpetuated injustice. He envisioned a future where reason triumphed over tyranny, where every person enjoyed equal rights regardless of birth or circumstance. Little did he know that this vision would one day inspire millions and cement his place among history's greatest leaders. As Chapter 1 draws to a close, we leave Thomas Jefferson standing at the threshold of adulthood, poised to embark on a journey that will test his convictions, challenge his beliefs, and ultimately shape the course of a nation. The foundations laid during his childhood and youth will serve as guiding principles throughout his life, driving him to pursue ideals that remain relevant even today. The bustling streets of Williamsburg buzzed with activity as Thomas Jefferson arrived in the summer of 1760, a young man eager to make his mark on the world. The colonial capital of Virginia was a vibrant hub of intellectual discourse, political intrigue, and cultural refinement, a fitting backdrop for Jefferson's burgeoning ambitions. At just 17 years old, he entered the College of William and Mary with a clear sense of purpose: to arm himself with the tools necessary to navigate and ultimately reshape the complex landscape of 18th century America. Williamsburg itself was a study in contrasts. Elegant brick buildings lined its main thoroughfare, housing taverns where debates raged late into the night, shops brimming with imported goods, and government offices that symbolized British authority. Yet beneath this veneer of prosperity lay simmering tensions between colonists and their distant rulers across the Atlantic. Jefferson quickly became attuned to these undercurrents, absorbing the grievances of farmers, merchants, and laborers who felt increasingly burdened by imperial policies. For him, Williamsburg was not merely a place of learning but also a microcosm of the challenges facing the colonies. At the college, Jefferson distinguished himself as an exceptional student. His professors noted his ability to grasp complex concepts with ease and his uncanny knack for synthesizing disparate ideas into coherent arguments. Under the guidance of Dr. William Small, a Scottish polymath who taught mathematics and natural philosophy, Jefferson delved into subjects ranging from Newtonian physics to moral philosophy. Small recognized Jefferson's potential early on, often inviting him to join intimate gatherings at his home, where discussions about science, ethics, and governance unfolded over glasses of Madeira wine. These evenings left an indelible impression on Jefferson, reinforcing his belief in the power of reason and education to drive societal progress. It was through Small that Jefferson met George Wythe, a towering figure in Virginia's legal community. Wythe took Jefferson under his wing, introducing him to the intricacies of law while also serving as a mentor in matters of character and integrity. Their relationship proved transformative. Wythe instilled in Jefferson a deep respect for the rule of law, emphasizing its role as a safeguard against tyranny. He encouraged Jefferson to read widely. Works by John Locke, Baron de Montesquieu, and David Hume became staples of his growing library, and to think critically about how these philosophical principles could be applied to real-world problems. Through Wythe, Jefferson learned that true leadership required not only intellect but also moral fortitude. Jefferson's time at William and Mary coincided with a period of heightened political awareness among the colonists. The Stamp Act of 1765 ignited widespread protests throughout the colonies, fueling resentment against Britain's imposition of taxes without representation. In Williamsburg, Jefferson witnessed firsthand the fervor of the resistance movement. He attended fiery speeches delivered by Patrick Henry, whose impassioned oratory captivated audiences and galvanized opposition to British policies. Though Jefferson remained largely silent during these early days of dissent, he absorbed every word, internalizing the arguments being made and refining his own views on liberty and sovereignty. By the time Jefferson graduated in 1762, he had already begun to envision a new kind of society, one rooted in Enlightenment ideals and free from the constraints of monarchy. Armed with a degree and a burning desire to effect change, he returned to Shadwell to begin practicing law. Over the next several years, he honed his skills in the courtroom, representing clients in cases that ranged from property disputes to criminal defense. His reputation grew steadily, bolstered by his meticulous preparation and eloquent advocacy. Yet even as he built a successful legal career, Jefferson remained acutely aware of the broader issues confronting Virginia and the other colonies. One of the most significant events of this period occurred in 1769, when Jefferson was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses, seated alongside seasoned politicians like Peyton Randolph and Richard Henry Lee. Jefferson initially kept a low profile, preferring to observe and learn rather than immediately assert himself. However, it wasn't long before his voice began to resonate within the chamber. In 1774, following the passage of the Coercive Acts, a series of punitive measures imposed by Britain in response to the Boston Tea Party, Jefferson drafted a summary view of the rights of British America. This bold document articulated the colonists' grievances and asserted their right to self-governance, earning Jefferson widespread acclaim and establishing him as a formidable advocate for independence. Jefferson's rise to prominence was aided by his growing network of influential allies. Among them was John Adams, a fiery lawyer from Massachusetts, whom Jefferson first encountered during sessions of the Continental Congress. Despite their differing temperaments, Adams was outspoken and combative, while Jefferson was reserved and diplomatic. The two men developed a mutual respect that would endure for decades. Another key figure in Jefferson's orbit was Benjamin Franklin, whose wit and wisdom provided valuable counsel as Jefferson navigated the treacherous waters of colonial politics. As tensions between Britain and the colonies escalated, Jefferson found himself increasingly drawn into the struggle for independence. In June 1775, he joined the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia, where delegates from across the colonies convened to determine their collective fate. Here, Jefferson encountered some of the brightest minds of the era, including Thomas Paine, whose pamphlet Common Sense had electrified public opinion in favor of separation from Britain. Inspired by Paine's rhetoric and emboldened by the resolve of his fellow delegates, Jefferson threw himself wholeheartedly into the cause of liberty. His moment of destiny arrived in June 1776, when Congress appointed him to a 5-member committee, tasked with drafting a formal Declaration of Independence. Though initially reluctant to take the lead, he preferred working behind the scenes. Jefferson ultimately accepted the responsibility, recognizing the gravity of the task at hand. Drawing upon years of study and reflection, he crafted a document that transcended mere political expediency, articulating universal truths about human rights and the legitimate purposes of government. When he penned the immortal words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal," Jefferson gave voice to aspirations shared by countless individuals yearning for freedom. The Declaration of Independence, adopted on July 4, 1776, marked a turning point not only in Jefferson's life, but in the history of the world. Overnight, He became a household name, celebrated as the author of one of the most profound statements of liberty ever written. Yet fame brought its own challenges. Critics accused him of hypocrisy, pointing to his ownership of enslaved people despite his professed belief in equality. Others questioned his judgment, particularly after his tenure as governor of Virginia 1779-1781, during which British forces invaded the state and nearly captured him. Despite these setbacks, Jefferson remained steadfast in his commitment to the principles enshrined in the Declaration, viewing them as a beacon of hope for future generations. By the end of this chapter, we see Jefferson transitioning from a promising young lawyer to a visionary statesman, whose ideas continue to reverberate across centuries. The seeds planted during his years in Williamsburg have blossomed into a legacy that will define his life's work. As he prepares to face new challenges on the international stage, Jefferson stands ready to defend the fledgling republic against threats both foreign and domestic. The ink had barely dried on the Declaration of Independence when Thomas Jefferson found himself thrust into the tumultuous world of nation-building. The war for independence raged on, and the fledgling United States faced existential threats from both within and without. For Jefferson, this period marked a transformation, not only in his personal life, but also in his role as one of the principal architects of American democracy. As he navigated the complexities of governance, diplomacy, and ideological conflict, Jefferson's vision for the new republic began to crystallize, laying the groundwork for institutions that would endure long after his death. Following the adoption of the Declaration, Jefferson returned briefly to Virginia, where he resumed his duties in the House of Delegates. It was here that he embarked on one of his most ambitious legislative projects, reforming the state's legal code. Recognizing that laws inherited from colonial rule were ill-suited to a free society, Jefferson proposed sweeping changes aimed at aligning Virginia's statutes with Enlightenment principles. Among his proposals was the abolition of primogeniture and entail, feudal practices that concentrated wealth and land ownership in the hands of a privileged few. By dismantling these outdated systems, Jefferson sought to create a more egalitarian society, where merit, rather than birthright, determined success. Jefferson also championed religious freedom, introducing the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom in 1777. This landmark piece of legislation, which would later serve as a model for the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, declared that no man shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship, place, or ministry whatsoever. Though it took nearly a decade to pass, the statute reflected Jefferson's unwavering belief in the separation of church and state, a principle he viewed as essential to preserving individual liberty. His advocacy earned him praise from allies like James Madison, who helped shepherd the bill through the legislature, but it also drew criticism from conservative factions who feared the erosion of traditional values. In addition to his legislative efforts, Jefferson played a pivotal role in shaping public education in Virginia. Believing that an informed citizenry was vital to the health of a democracy, he drafted plans for a comprehensive system of schools accessible to all children, regardless of social class. While his proposals were ahead of their time and failed to gain traction during his lifetime, they underscored his commitment to fostering intellectual growth and civic responsibility among future generations. Despite his accomplishments in Virginia, Jefferson's tenure as governor 1779-1781 proved to be a trial by fire. Tasked with leading the state during some of the darkest days of the Revolutionary War, he struggled to balance administrative duties with the demands of military strategy. When British forces under General Benedict Arnold launched a surprise invasion of Virginia in 1781, Jefferson's leadership came under intense scrutiny. Critics accused him of failing to adequately prepare the state's defenses, and rumors swirled that he had fled Richmond just moments before British troops arrived. Though Jefferson maintained that logistical constraints, not cowardice, had hindered his response, the episode left a stain on his reputation that would haunt him for years. Yet even in defeat, Jefferson demonstrated resilience. After stepping down as governor, he retreated to Monticello, the mountaintop estate he had begun building in 1768. Surrounded by rolling hills and panoramic views of the Virginia countryside, Monticello became both a sanctuary and a laboratory for Jefferson's ideas. Here, he experimented with innovative agricultural techniques, designed architectural marvels inspired by classical antiquity, and cultivated friendships with luminaries such as the Marquis de Lafayette, who visited frequently. These quiet years allowed Jefferson to reflect on his experiences and refine his vision for America's future. It was during this period that Jefferson received news of the Treaty of Paris, 1783, which formally ended the Revolutionary War. Overjoyed by the prospect of peace, Jefferson eagerly accepted an appointment to represent the United States abroad as minister to France. Arriving in Paris in 1784, he entered a world vastly different from the agrarian landscapes of Virginia. The French capital was a dazzling tapestry of art, philosophy, and political ferment, teeming with intellectuals who debated everything from Rousseau's theories of governance to the latest advances in science. Jefferson thrived in this environment, immersing himself in salon culture and forging connections with figures such as Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and the Comtesse de Tess. While serving as minister, Jefferson developed a deep appreciation for European culture, particularly its architecture and cuisine. He meticulously documented his travels across the continent, sketching buildings and collecting artifacts that would later influence his designs for Monticello and the University of Virginia. At the same time, however, he grew increasingly concerned about the growing unrest in France. Witnessing firsthand the poverty and inequality plaguing French society, Jefferson sympathized with calls for reform but worried about the potential for chaos. His correspondence with friends back home revealed a nuanced understanding of revolution. While he believed fervently in the right of people to overthrow oppressive regimes, he cautioned against abandoning reason in favor of mob rule. Jefferson's diplomatic mission coincided with another transformative chapter in his personal life: his relationship with Sally Hemings, an enslaved woman owned by his late wife's family. Historical accounts suggest that Jefferson fathered several children with Hemings during his time in Paris. Though the nature of their relationship remains a subject of debate, what is certain is that Jefferson's interactions with Hemings highlight the contradictions inherent in his worldview. A staunch advocate for liberty, he nonetheless perpetuated the institution of slavery, leaving behind a legacy marred by moral ambiguity. Upon returning to the United States in 1789, Jefferson assumed the role of Secretary of State under President George Washington. In this capacity, he clashed repeatedly with Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton over issues ranging from fiscal policy to foreign relations. Hamilton, a proponent of centralized authority and industrialization, envisioned a robust federal government capable of fostering economic growth. Jefferson, by contrast, championed agrarianism and states' rights, fearing that excessive centralization would erode individual freedoms. Their ideological differences gave rise to the first-party system in American politics, with Jefferson emerging as the leader of the Democratic-Republican Party, and Hamilton representing the Federalists. One of the most contentious debates between Jefferson and Hamilton centered on the creation of a national bank. Hamilton argued that a centralized financial institution was necessary to stabilize the economy and fund the nation's debts. Jefferson countered that the Constitution did not explicitly grant Congress the power to establish such an entity, warning that it would concentrate wealth and power in the hands of a privileged elite. Though Washington ultimately sided with Hamilton, Jefferson's arguments resonated with many Americans who shared his skepticism of centralized authority. As Jefferson's influence grew, so too did his determination to steer the country toward a path aligned with his ideals. In 1796, he ran unsuccessfully for president, losing narrowly to John Adams. Despite his defeat, Jefferson remained active in politics, using his platform to critique Adams's administration and rally support for the Democratic Republicans. His opposition culminated in the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798, which Jefferson denounced as unconstitutional violations of free speech and due process. In response, he secretly authored the Kentucky Resolutions, asserting that states had the right to nullify federal laws deemed unconstitutional, a radical stance that further polarized the nation. By the dawn of the 19th century, Jefferson stood poised to ascend to the presidency, elected in 1800 after a bitterly contested election. He viewed his victory as a triumph of democratic principles over aristocratic tendencies. On March 4, 1801, he delivered his inaugural address, famously declaring, "We are all Republicans, we are all Federalists." These words encapsulated his hope for unity in a deeply divided nation, even as he prepared to implement policies that would reshape the country's trajectory. Thomas Jefferson's inauguration on March 4, 1801, marked a new chapter in American history, a peaceful transfer of power between political rivals that underscored the resilience of the fledgling republic. Standing before a crowd gathered at the Capitol, Jefferson delivered an address that sought to heal the wounds of partisan division while affirming his vision for the nation. His words, "We are all Republicans, we are all Federalists," were not merely rhetorical. They reflected his belief in the possibility of unity despite ideological differences. Yet behind this conciliatory tone lay a steely determination to steer the country toward a future defined by agrarian simplicity, limited government, and individual liberty. As he settled into the presidency, Jefferson faced immediate challenges that tested his leadership and forced him to reconcile his ideals with pragmatic governance. Chief among these was the looming specter of conflict with European powers. The Napoleonic Wars had plunged Europe into chaos, with Britain and France vying for dominance on land and sea. Caught in the crossfire, the United States found itself increasingly vulnerable to economic coercion and military threats. British impressment of American sailors and French interference with neutral shipping jeopardized U.S. commerce, sparking outrage across the nation. Though Jefferson initially pursued diplomacy, he soon realized that avoiding entanglement would require bold action. One of Jefferson's earliest and most consequential decisions as president came in 1803, when he seized an opportunity that would forever alter the geography and destiny of the United States: the Louisiana Purchase. For years, Americans had eyed the vast territory west of the Mississippi River with a mixture of curiosity and covetousness. Controlled by Spain since the mid-1700s, the region served as a buffer between the young republic and its European rivals. However, in 1800, Napoleon Bonaparte negotiated the secret Treaty of San Ildefonso, transferring control of Louisiana back to France. Alarmed by the prospect of a powerful French empire on their western border, Jefferson dispatched James Monroe and Robert Livingston to Paris, with instructions to secure navigation rights along the Mississippi and, if possible, purchase the port of New Orleans. What happened next exceeded even Jefferson's wildest expectations. Facing financial strain from his wars in Europe and recognizing the difficulty of defending Louisiana against potential British incursions, Napoleon offered to sell not just New Orleans, but the entire Louisiana territory for $15 million, a bargain that amounted to roughly 4 cents per acre. Faced with an unprecedented opportunity, Jefferson wrestled with constitutional concerns. The Constitution did not explicitly grant the president authority to acquire foreign lands, and Jefferson, ever the strict constructionist, agonized over whether such a move would set a dangerous precedent for executive overreach. Ultimately, however, pragmatism prevailed. With the enthusiastic support of Congress, Jefferson completed the purchase, doubling the size of the United States overnight and securing access to critical waterways. The Louisiana Purchase transformed Jefferson into a national hero, earning him accolades as a visionary leader who had expanded America's horizons. It also sparked debates about the implications of westward expansion. Some argued that the acquisition violated Native American sovereignty, while others worried about how slavery might spread into newly acquired territories. Jefferson himself grappled with these questions, acknowledging the moral complexities inherent in territorial growth. Nonetheless, he viewed the purchase as essential to ensuring the survival and prosperity of the Republic, envisioning a nation of independent farmers stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific. To explore and map the newly acquired lands, Jefferson commissioned the Lewis and Clark expedition, one of the most ambitious scientific endeavors of the era. In 1804, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark set out from Lewis, with a team of soldiers, interpreters, and guides, tasked with charting a route to the Pacific Ocean and documenting the flora, fauna, and indigenous peoples they encountered along the way. Jefferson provided detailed instructions for the expedition, emphasizing the importance of gathering knowledge about natural resources and fostering friendly relations with native tribes. Over the course of 2 years, Lewis and Clark traversed uncharted wilderness, braving harsh conditions and overcoming countless obstacles. Their successful return in 1806 brought back a wealth of information that captivated the public imagination and fueled further exploration of the West. While the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark expedition cemented Jefferson's legacy as a champion of expansion, his second term as president was marked by controversy and crisis. Relations with Britain deteriorated rapidly as the Royal Navy continued to seize American ships and impress sailors into service. Jefferson responded with the Embargo Act of 1807, which prohibited U.S. vessels from trading with foreign nations, intended to pressure Britain and France into respecting American neutrality. The embargo instead devastated the American economy, particularly in New England, where merchants and shipbuilders bore the brunt of its impact. Critics lambasted Jefferson for overstepping his authority and stifling commerce, while supporters defended the measure as a necessary sacrifice to avoid war. The failure of the embargo highlighted the limitations of Jefferson's non-interventionist philosophy. Despite his aversion to militarism, events beyond his control pushed the nation closer to conflict. By the end of his presidency, tensions with Britain had reached a boiling point, setting the stage for the War of 1812 under his successor, James Madison. Though Jefferson left office in 1809 amid mixed reviews, his tenure laid the foundation for America's emergence as a continental power. Retiring to Monticello after 8 years in the White House, Jefferson embraced a quieter life devoted to intellectual pursuits and personal reflection. He corresponded regularly with statesmen, scientists, and philosophers, sharing insights on everything from agriculture to architecture. At the same time, he remained deeply engaged with the issues shaping the nation's future. One of his proudest achievements during this period was the founding of the University of Virginia in 1819. Conceived as an institution free from religious dogma and dedicated to fostering independent thought, the university embodied Jefferson's belief in the transformative power of education. Its design, A series of interconnected pavilions surrounding a central lawn reflected his commitment to blending functionality with beauty. Jefferson's later years were tinged with melancholy. Financial difficulties plagued him, exacerbated by declining tobacco prices and mounting debts incurred through lavish spending on Monticello. Meanwhile, the death of his daughter Polly in 1804 and the passing of close friends like John Adams weighed heavily on his spirits. Yet even in old age, Jefferson retained his optimism and faith in humanity's capacity for progress. Writing to Adams in 1816, he expressed hope that the mass of mankind has not been born with saddles on their backs, nor a favored few booted and spurred, ready to ride them. On July 4, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson passed away at Monticello, mere hours before his former rival and friend John Adams drew his last breath. The timing seemed almost preordained, as if fate itself wished to underscore the enduring bond between the two men and their shared role in shaping the nation. As news of their deaths spread, Americans mourned the loss of two titans whose lives had been intertwined with the birth and growth of the Republic. Thomas Jefferson's legacy is a tapestry woven with brilliance and contradiction. No aspect of his life better encapsulates this duality than his relationship with slavery, a subject that haunted him throughout his career and continues to spark debate centuries later. As the author of the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson championed the principle that all men are created equal. Yet he owned hundreds of enslaved people over the course of his lifetime, profiting from their labor while simultaneously grappling with the moral implications of human bondage. This paradox lies at the heart of Jefferson's story, revealing both the limits of his vision and the complexities of his era. Jefferson inherited his first enslaved individuals as a teenager, following the death of his father in 1757. By the time he reached adulthood, he had become deeply entrenched in the institution of slavery, relying on it to sustain his lifestyle and maintain the operations of Monticello. Enslaved workers tilled his fields, cooked his meals, cared for his children, and constructed the very mansion that symbolized his intellectual and social aspirations. Despite his dependence on slavery, Jefferson harbored profound misgivings about its morality. In Notes on the State of Virginia, 1785, he condemned the practice as a moral depravity and expressed fears that God would one day punish America for its complicity. Yet these words were accompanied by a troubling ambivalence. Jefferson acknowledged the injustice of slavery, but stopped short of advocating for immediate abolition, instead proposing gradual emancipation coupled with colonization, the resettlement of freed African Americans outside the United States. This cautious approach reflected broader societal attitudes during Jefferson's time. Many white Americans, particularly in the South, viewed slavery as an economic necessity rather than a moral failing. Plantation owners like Jefferson benefited immensely from the forced labor of enslaved people, whose contributions underpinned the agrarian economy upon which the nation was built. At the same time, Enlightenment ideals of liberty and equality created cognitive dissonance among those who profited from slavery while espousing democratic principles. For Jefferson, this tension manifested in moments of introspection and occasional gestures toward reform, though these efforts often fell short of meaningful action. One of the most poignant examples of Jefferson's internal conflict can be found in his relationship with Sally Hemings, an enslaved woman believed to have borne 6 of his children. Historical evidence suggests that Jefferson began this relationship during his diplomatic mission to France, where Hemings accompanied his daughter Polly as a companion. While the nature of their bond remains a matter of speculation, some argue it was consensual. Others contend it was coerced by the power dynamics inherent in slavery. It underscores the intimate yet exploitative connections that existed between enslavers and the enslaved. Hemings's descendants played a significant role in shaping public memory of Jefferson. challenging sanitized narratives that sought to erase uncomfortable truths about his private life. Despite his personal entanglements with slavery, Jefferson occasionally supported legislative measures aimed at curbing its expansion. During his tenure in the Virginia House of Delegates, he proposed banning the importation of enslaved Africans into the state, arguing that such restrictions would weaken the institution over time. Similarly, as president, he signed the act prohibiting importation of slaves in 1807, which outlawed the transatlantic slave trade. However, these actions must be understood within their historical context. Both initiatives were driven less by altruism than by practical considerations. Virginia lawmakers hoped to increase the value of enslaved people already residing in the state, while Jefferson's ban on imports aligned with broader geopolitical strategies against European rivals. Thus, even when Jefferson took steps to address slavery, his motivations were often intertwined with self-interest or political expediency. The contradictions embedded in Jefferson's stance on slavery extended beyond policy to his philosophical writings. In Notes on the State of Virginia, he articulated racist stereotypes about African Americans, asserting that they were intellectually and morally inferior to whites. These views, though reflective of prevailing prejudices of the time, have cast a long shadow over his reputation. Critics argue that Jefferson's racism provided ideological justification for maintaining slavery, allowing him to reconcile his belief in liberty with his participation in oppression. Defenders counter that Jefferson's remarks should be interpreted as products of their era, cautioning against applying modern standards to historical figures. Regardless of interpretation, the fact remains that Jefferson's ideas contributed to enduring racial hierarchies that continue to shape American society today. Jefferson's inability to fully extricate himself from slavery raises important questions about leadership and accountability. As a statesman celebrated for articulating universal truths about human rights, he failed to extend those principles to all individuals within his sphere of influence. His unwillingness to free his own enslaved workers apart from Hemings's children, whom he allowed to leave Monticello without formal manumission papers, has led some historians to question whether his advocacy for freedom was genuine or merely rhetorical. Others point out that Jefferson operated within structural constraints that made emancipation difficult, if not impossible, for someone of his standing. Either way, his example serves as a reminder of the gap between ideals and reality, a chasm that persists in struggles for justice across generations. In his final years, Jefferson seemed acutely aware of the moral reckoning awaiting future generations. Writing to Edward Coles, a young abolitionist who urged him to take a stand against slavery, Jefferson confessed that the issue weighed heavily on his conscience. He described slavery as a fire bell in the night, warning that its continued existence threatened to tear the nation apart. Though he lacked the courage to confront the problem directly, he implored younger leaders to find solutions that balanced competing interests. Tragically, Jefferson died without witnessing the resolution of the crisis he foresaw. Less than 3 decades after his passing, the United States descended into civil war over the very question he had so fervently avoided addressing. Today, Jefferson's legacy is inextricably linked to the paradoxes of his life. He remains a towering figure in American history, revered for his contributions to democracy and vilified for his complicity in systemic injustice. Efforts to reckon with this complexity have taken many forms, from scholarly analyses to public memorials. In recent years, institutions like Monticello have embraced a more inclusive narrative, highlighting the experiences of enslaved individuals who lived and labored there. Exhibits featuring artifacts recovered from Mulberry Row, the industrial hub of Jefferson's plantation, offer visitors a glimpse into the daily lives of those whose labor sustained his vision of agrarian prosperity. These initiatives reflect a growing recognition that understanding Jefferson requires confronting the full scope of his humanity, including the flaws that make him both relatable and troubling. Ultimately, Jefferson's story forces us to grapple with uncomfortable truths about the foundations of our nation. His writings on liberty inspired countless movements for freedom around the world, Yet his silence on slavery perpetuated systems of inequality that endure to this day. By examining his life through multiple lenses, philosopher, politician, enslaver, we gain a richer appreciation for the interplay of ideals and imperfections that define the human experience. Jefferson invites us not only to celebrate progress but also to confront unfinished business, reminding us that the pursuit of justice is an ongoing journey rather than a fixed destination. As Thomas Jefferson retreated from public life in 1809, he entered a phase marked by introspection, intellectual vigor, and an enduring commitment to shaping the future of the nation. Though no longer at the helm of government, his influence continued to ripple through American society, driven by his passion for education, architecture, and philosophy. This period, often referred to as his retirement, was anything but idle. Instead, it represented a renaissance of creativity and purpose, as Jefferson poured his energy into projects that would leave an indelible mark on posterity. At the center of Jefferson's post-presidential years was Monticello, the architectural masterpiece perched atop a mountain in Charlottesville, Virginia. More than just a residence, Monticello was a living testament to Jefferson's eclectic interests and innovative spirit. Designed over several decades, the house reflected his fascination with classical antiquity, blending neoclassical elements with practical functionality. Columns reminiscent of ancient Greece supported porticos overlooking sweeping vistas, while skylights and hidden dumbwaiters showcased his ingenuity in solving everyday problems. Every detail, from the octagonal dome crowning the structure to the meticulously landscaped gardens below, revealed Jefferson's meticulous attention to aesthetics and efficiency. Monticello also served as a hub for intellectual exchange. Visitors flocked to the estate, eager to engage with one of America's preeminent thinkers. Whether hosting dignitaries like the Marquis de Lafayette or engaging in spirited debates with neighbors, Jefferson relished the opportunity to share ideas and challenge conventional wisdom. His library, which contained thousands of volumes spanning subjects from philosophy to agriculture, became a sanctuary where he explored topics ranging from linguistics to meteorology. Even in retirement, Jefferson remained insatiably curious, viewing knowledge as both a personal pursuit and a public good. One of Jefferson's most ambitious undertakings during this time was the founding of the University of Virginia, conceived as an antidote to what he saw as the religious dogma and elitism pervading other institutions of higher learning. The university embodied Jefferson's vision of education as a force for enlightenment and democracy. He designed every aspect of the campus himself, from the layout of its iconic lawn to the curriculum emphasizing science, history, and modern languages. Rejecting traditional hierarchies, Jefferson insisted that faculty members live among students in connected pavilions, fostering an environment of collaboration and mutual respect. When the university opened its doors in 1825, it stood as a bold experiment in progressive pedagogy, a legacy that continues to inspire educators worldwide. Jefferson's contributions extended beyond physical structures to the realm of ideas. Throughout his retirement, he corresponded extensively with luminaries such as John Adams, James Madison, and Benjamin Rush, exchanging letters that ranged from light-hearted reminiscences to profound reflections on governance and morality. These epistolary dialogues not only preserved friendships forged during the Revolutionary era, but also allowed Jefferson to refine his thoughts on pressing issues of the day. For instance, his exchanges with Adams often centered on the tension between idealism and pragmatism in politics, a theme that resonated deeply given their shared experiences as founders of the Republic. Their renewed camaraderie after years of estrangement underscored Jefferson's capacity for reconciliation and his belief in the importance of civil discourse. Despite these accomplishments, Jefferson's later years were fraught with financial difficulties. Decades of lavish spending on Monticello, combined with declining tobacco prices and mounting debts inherited from his father-in-law's estate, left him teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. To make matters worse, Jefferson refused to sell his beloved plantation or reduce his workforce, fearing that doing so would disrupt the livelihoods of those who depended on him. Instead, He relied on loans and creative accounting to keep creditors at bay, all while maintaining appearances of stability. This precarious balancing act took a toll on his health and peace of mind, yet he remained steadfast in his determination to preserve Monticello as a symbol of his ideals. Amidst these challenges, Jefferson found solace in contemplating the broader trajectory of the nation he had helped create. He took pride in the westward expansion facilitated by the Louisiana Purchase, seeing it as validation of his agrarian vision for America. At the same time, he expressed concern about emerging threats to Republican values, particularly the rise of industrialization and urbanization. In essays and correspondence, he warned against the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a privileged few, urging vigilance in safeguarding the rights of ordinary citizens. His advocacy for states' rights and limited federal authority, though controversial, stemmed from a genuine desire to protect individual freedoms from encroachment by centralized authority. Perhaps the most poignant moment of Jefferson's twilight years came in July 1826, when the nation prepared to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. By then gravely ill, Jefferson summoned the strength to pen a final message commemorating the occasion. "May it be to the world," he wrote, "what I believe it will be. 'Tis a signal arousing men to burst the chains under which monkish ignorance and superstition had persuaded them to bind themselves." These words, delivered just days before his death on July 4, captured the essence of his lifelong mission to ignite a flame of liberty that would burn brightly for generations to come. Jefferson's passing coincided with that of John Adams, whose own final words, "Thomas Jefferson survives," poignantly highlighted the intertwined destinies of the two men. Together, they represented the hopes and contradictions of a fledgling nation striving to reconcile lofty ideals with imperfect realities. As news of their deaths spread, Americans mourned the loss of two giants whose lives had shaped the course of history. Tributes poured in from across the country, celebrating Jefferson not only as a statesman and scholar but also as a dreamer who dared to imagine a better world. In reflecting on Jefferson's later years, one cannot help but marvel at the breadth of his achievements and the depth of his contradictions. From the halls of Monticello to the classrooms of the University of Virginia, he left behind a legacy that defies easy categorization. He was, at once, a champion of freedom and a participant in oppression, a visionary architect and a pragmatic politician, a man of boundless curiosity and undeniable flaws. Yet, it is precisely this complexity that makes Jefferson so compelling, a figure whose struggles mirror our own as we navigate the ongoing quest for justice, equality, and understanding. Thomas Jefferson's death on July 4, 1826, marked the end of an era but also the beginning of a legacy that would evolve and expand over time. His contributions to American history are monumental, yet they remain deeply intertwined with the contradictions that defined his life. As both a revolutionary thinker and a participant in systemic injustices, Jefferson occupies a unique place in the national narrative, one that continues to provoke debate, admiration, and critique. This chapter explores how Jefferson's ideas and actions have shaped modern perspectives on democracy, slavery, education, and architecture, while examining the ways in which contemporary society grapples with his complex legacy. Jeffersonian democracy, a vision for the people. At the heart of Jefferson's enduring influence lies his conception of democracy, a system rooted in the sovereignty of the people and the primacy of individual rights. His belief in agrarianism as the foundation of a virtuous republic resonated deeply with early Americans who cherished notions of self-sufficiency and local governance. Though Jefferson's vision of a nation dominated by independent farmers has long since given way to industrialization and urbanization, his emphasis on decentralized authority and civic participation remains central to American political culture. Concepts such as states' rights, checks and balances, and the separation of church and state can all be traced back to Jeffersonian principles enshrined in documents like the Declaration of Independence and the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. However, Jefferson's democratic ideals were not without limitations. Democratic ideals were not without limitations. Critics argue that his advocacy for limited government often served to protect entrenched interests, particularly those of wealthy landowners. Moreover, his reluctance to confront slavery directly undermined his professed commitment to equality, exposing a fundamental flaw in his philosophy. Despite these shortcomings, Jefferson's writings continue to inspire movements for social change, offering a framework through which advocates seek to address inequities and expand access to opportunity. Slavery and its shadows. Few aspects of Jefferson's legacy elicit as much controversy as his relationship with slavery. His ownership of enslaved individuals starkly contradicts the egalitarian rhetoric of the Declaration of Independence, raising difficult questions about the compatibility of liberty and oppression. Modern scholars and activists have sought to illuminate this dark chapter of Jefferson's life, emphasizing the humanity of those who labored under his ownership. Efforts to recover and preserve the stories of enslaved workers at Monticello, such as Isaac Granger Jefferson, Burwell Colbert, and Betty Hemmings, have provided invaluable insights into their resilience and agency, challenging sanitized narratives that once marginalized their voices. Public discourse around Jefferson's complicity in slavery has intensified in recent decades, prompting calls for accountability and reconciliation. Monuments dedicated to him have become flashpoints in broader debates about historical memory and racial justice. Some argue that honoring Jefferson perpetuates a whitewashed version of history, while others contend that acknowledging his flaws alongside his achievements fosters a more nuanced understanding of the past. These discussions underscore the ongoing struggle to reconcile America's founding ideals with its painful realities, using Jefferson's example as both a cautionary tale and a catalyst for progress. Education as a pillar of progress. Jefferson's commitment to education represents one of his most positive and enduring legacies. The University of Virginia stands as a testament to his belief in the transformative power of knowledge, embodying principles of accessibility, innovation, and intellectual freedom. Today, the university continues to thrive as a premier institution of higher learning, attracting students and scholars from around the globe. Its emphasis on interdisciplinary study and critical inquiry reflects Jefferson's conviction that education should prepare individuals not only for personal success but also for active citizenship. Beyond UVA, Jefferson's influence extends to educational reform movements throughout the United States. His advocacy for public schooling laid the groundwork for policies aimed at ensuring equitable access to quality education. While significant disparities persist, particularly along racial and socioeconomic lines, Jefferson's vision serves as a rallying cry for those working to close achievement gaps and promote lifelong learning. Initiatives such as STEM programs, community colleges, and digital literacy campaigns echo his belief in the importance of adapting education to meet the needs of a changing world. Architecture as art and ideology. Jefferson's architectural innovations continue to shape the built environment, both in America and abroad. His neoclassical designs, characterized by symmetry, proportion, and reverence for classical antiquity, set a standard for public buildings that endures to this day. The rotunda at the University of Virginia, modeled after the Pantheon in Rome, exemplifies his ability to blend functionality with beauty. Similarly, Monticello remains an iconic symbol of American ingenuity, drawing visitors eager to explore its intricate details and rich history. Jefferson's architectural philosophy extended beyond aesthetics to encompass ideals of democracy and transparency. He believed that physical spaces could reflect and even reinforce political values, a concept evident in his design of the Virginia state capitol. By incorporating elements reminiscent of ancient Greece and Rome, he sought to evoke associations with republicanism and civic virtue. Contemporary architects and urban planners draw inspiration from Jefferson's work, integrating similar themes into projects ranging from government complexes to public parks. The intersection of science and philosophy. A polymath by nature, Jefferson made significant contributions to fields outside politics and architecture. His interest in natural history, agriculture, and technology reflected a holistic approach to knowledge that anticipated modern interdisciplinary research. At Monticello, he experimented with crop rotation, weather recording, and innovative farming techniques, demonstrating a practical application of scientific principles. These efforts earned him recognition as a pioneer in sustainable practices, aligning with current trends toward environmental stewardship and climate resilience. Philosophically, Jefferson's embrace of Enlightenment ideals positioned him as a bridge between tradition and modernity. His correspondence reveals a mind constantly seeking answers to profound questions about human nature, morality, and governance. In an age increasingly shaped by artificial intelligence, globalization, and ethical dilemmas, Jefferson's writings offer valuable lessons about balancing reason with compassion, skepticism with hope. His famous assertion that the earth belongs in usufruct to the living challenges us to consider our responsibilities to future generations, a message particularly relevant amid growing concerns about sustainability and intergenerational equity. Reckoning with complexity. Ultimately, Thomas Jefferson's legacy defies easy categorization. He was a man of extraordinary talent and ambition, whose accomplishments reshaped the course of history. Yet he was also a product of his time, constrained by societal norms and personal biases that clouded his judgment. Recognizing this duality is essential to understanding his impact not as a static figure frozen in marble, but as a dynamic presence whose contradictions mirror our own struggles to navigate complexity. Today, Jefferson's story invites us to engage in honest dialogue about the forces that have shaped America. It challenges us to confront uncomfortable truths about race, power, and privilege, while celebrating the ideals that drive us toward a more inclusive and just society. Whether viewed as a hero, a hypocrite, or something in between, Jefferson reminds us that progress requires both aspiration and accountability. A lesson as vital now as it was 2 centuries ago. In the decades following Thomas Jefferson's death, his legacy experienced a renaissance as Americans sought to define their national identity in an era of rapid change. This period, spanning the mid-19th century through the early 20th century, witnessed a resurgence of interest in Jefferson's ideas, writings, and accomplishments. As the United States grappled with issues such as westward expansion, industrialization, civil war, and Reconstruction, Jefferson emerged as both a unifying figure and a source of contention. His vision of democracy, agrarianism, and states' rights resonated deeply with certain segments of society, while others viewed his contradictions, particularly regarding slavery, as emblematic of unresolved tensions within the nation. This chapter explores how Jefferson's image evolved during this transformative time, examining his role in shaping debates over governance, education, architecture, and the cult of Jefferson. By the mid-19th century, Jefferson had become something of a cultural icon, celebrated as a champion of liberty and individualism. His writings, particularly the Declaration of Independence, were invoked by diverse groups seeking to justify their causes, from abolitionists advocating for emancipation to Southern secessionists defending states' rights. In 1848, Congress commissioned a statue of Jefferson for the Capitol Rotunda, solidifying his status as one of America's founding heroes. The monument, designed by sculptor Pierre-Jean David Dangers, depicted Jefferson holding the Declaration, symbolizing his enduring significance as the author of America's creed. This cult of Jefferson extended beyond official commemorations to popular culture. Biographies, essays, and speeches lionized him as a philosopher-statesman whose wisdom transcended his time. One notable example is Henry S. Randall's three-volume Life of Thomas Jefferson, 1858, which portrayed Jefferson as a paragon of virtue and intellectual rigor. While these works often glossed over his flaws, they contributed to a romanticized image of Jefferson that dominated public consciousness well into the 20th century. At the same time, Jefferson's Monticello became a pilgrimage site for admirers eager to connect with the man behind the myth. After years of neglect following his death, efforts to preserve the estate gained momentum in the late 19th century. In 1865, naval officer Uriah P. Lovey, a Jewish American who admired Jefferson's advocacy for religious freedom, purchased Monticello and undertook extensive renovations. Lovey's restoration project not only saved the property from ruin, but also underscored its importance as a symbol of American ideals. By the turn of the century, Monticello had been transformed into a shrine dedicated to Jefferson's memory, attracting visitors from across the country. Jefferson and the Crisis of Union. Jefferson's influence reached its zenith during the tumultuous years leading up to and following the Civil War. As sectional tensions escalated in the 1850s, politicians on both sides of the Mason-Dixon line turned to his writings to bolster their arguments. Northern abolitionists pointed to Jefferson's condemnation of slavery and notes on the state of Virginia as evidence of his opposition to human bondage, using his words to advocate for immediate emancipation. Frederick Douglass, in particular, invoked Jefferson's rhetoric to demand justice for African Americans, declaring, "What is true for the white man is equally true for the black man." Conversely, Southern leaders embraced Jefferson's advocacy for states' rights and strict constructionism as justification for resisting federal authority. They cited his Kentucky resolutions, which asserted the right of states to nullify unconstitutional laws, as precedent for opposing anti-slavery legislation. John C. Calhoun, a staunch defender of slavery and state sovereignty, frequently referenced Jefferson in his speeches, framing him as a prophet of limited government. This selective interpretation of Jefferson's philosophy highlights the malleability of his legacy, which could be wielded to support diametrically opposed agendas. When the Civil War erupted in 1861, Jefferson's shadow loomed large over the conflict. Both Union and Confederate forces claimed him as a spiritual forefather, each side convinced that his principles aligned with their cause. Abraham Lincoln, in his Gettysburg Address, echoed Jefferson's language of equality and self-government, casting the war as a struggle to fulfill the promise of the Declaration of Independence. Meanwhile, Confederate President Jefferson Davis named himself after Jefferson, signaling his belief that the Confederacy embodied Jeffersonian ideals of local autonomy and agrarian prosperity. The war's outcome dealt a blow to those who had co-opted Jefferson to defend slavery and secession. With the abolition of slavery and the ratification of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, the nation began to move toward a more inclusive vision of democracy, one that aligned more closely with Jefferson's stated aspirations, if not his personal practices. However, the scars of division lingered, and Jefferson remained a polarizing figure in the post-war years. Education reform and the University of Virginia. Jefferson's contributions to education continued to inspire reformers throughout the 19th century. The University of Virginia, which he founded in 1819, flourished despite financial challenges and growing pains. Its innovative curriculum and emphasis on academic freedom attracted students and faculty committed to advancing knowledge and promoting civic engagement. By the late 1800s, UVA had earned a reputation as one of the South's premier institutions, producing graduates who played key roles in shaping the region's recovery from the devastation of the Civil War. Beyond UVA, Jefferson's ideas influenced broader movements to expand access to education. Progressive educators drew inspiration from his belief in the democratization of knowledge, advocating for policies such as compulsory schooling, teacher training programs, and funding for rural schools. These efforts laid the groundwork for the modern public education system, ensuring that Jefferson's vision of an informed citizenry remained relevant in an increasingly complex world. Architecture and urban planning. Jefferson's architectural legacy also enjoyed renewed appreciation during this period. Architects and planners looked to his designs for guidance as cities expanded and new public buildings were constructed. The neoclassical style he championed, characterized by grand columns, symmetrical facades, and classical motifs, became synonymous with American civic architecture. Examples include the Lincoln Memorial, completed in 1922, and the Jefferson Memorial, dedicated in 1943, both of which pay homage to Jefferson's aesthetic sensibilities while celebrating his contributions to the nation. Urban planners adopted Jefferson's emphasis on functionality and beauty, incorporating elements of his designs into projects ranging from courthouses to parks. The City Beautiful movement, which sought to enhance urban environments through thoughtful design, reflected Jefferson's belief that physical spaces could foster civic pride and moral uplift. Even today, many American towns bear traces of Jeffersonian influence, from grid layouts inspired by his plans for Washington, D.C., to public squares modeled after Monticello's lawn. Race and reconciliation. Perhaps the most contentious aspect of Jefferson's legacy during this period was his relationship with slavery and race. While some sought to downplay or excuse his involvement in human bondage, others confronted it head-on, using his contradictions to highlight the unfinished business of racial equality. W. E. B. Du Bois, writing in The Souls of Black Folk, 1903. Described Jefferson as a man torn between two worlds, acknowledging his intellectual brilliance while critiquing his failure to act decisively against slavery. Efforts to reclaim Jefferson's legacy for marginalized communities gained traction in the early 20th century. Historians like Carter G. Woodson emphasized the contributions of enslaved individuals at Monticello, challenging dominant narratives that ignored their agency and humanity. Similarly, organizations such as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, invoked Jefferson's rhetoric of equality to demand civil rights and social justice. These initiatives demonstrated the power of Jefferson's words to inspire activism, even as they exposed the gap between his ideals and reality. A legacy in flux. As the 20th century dawned, Jefferson's legacy stood at a crossroads. He remained a revered figure, yet his contradictions ensured that his image would never settle into a single, static form. For some, he represented the best of America, its aspirations toward freedom, innovation, and progress. For others, he embodied the nation's deepest flaws, its tolerance of oppression, inequality, and hypocrisy. This tension, far from diminishing his relevance, underscored the complexity of his character and the enduring impact of his life's work. The 20th and 21st centuries have seen Thomas Jefferson's legacy undergo profound transformations, shaped by shifting societal values, evolving historical scholarship, and heightened awareness of systemic injustices. No longer confined to hagiographic portrayals or simplistic interpretations, Jefferson has emerged as a multifaceted figure whose contributions are celebrated even as his contradictions are scrutinized. This chapter examines how modern perspectives on Jefferson reflect broader debates about democracy, race, education, and architecture, while exploring efforts to reconcile his ideals with contemporary realities. Re-evaluating Jefferson through scholarship. One of the most significant developments in recent decades has been the re-evaluation of Jefferson's life and work through rigorous academic inquiry. Historians, archaeologists, and cultural critics have peeled back layers of myth and selective memory to present a more nuanced portrait of the man behind the legend. Works such as Joseph Ellis's American Sphinx, 1997, and Annette Gordon Reed's Pulitzer Prize-winning The Hemmingses of Monticello, 2008, exemplify this trend, offering detailed analyses that situate Jefferson within the context of his time, while confronting uncomfortable truths about his personal choices. Gordon Reed's groundbreaking research, in particular, has reshaped public understanding of Jefferson's relationship with Sally Hemings and their children. By meticulously examining oral histories, legal records, and DNA evidence, she established the likelihood of Jefferson's paternity and illuminated the lives of those enslaved at Monticello. Her work not only challenged prevailing narratives, but also highlighted the resilience and agency of individuals like Hemings, who navigated oppressive systems with remarkable fortitude. Such scholarship has paved the way for more inclusive storytelling, ensuring that voices once marginalized are now integral to discussions of Jefferson's legacy. In addition to individual biographies, interdisciplinary studies have explored Jefferson's impact across various domains. Books like David McCullough's John Adams, 2001, and John Meacham's Thomas Jefferson, The Art of Power, 2012, provide comparative insights into Jefferson's leadership style and philosophical outlook. Meanwhile, scholars specializing in fields such as environmental history, gender studies, and digital humanities have applied fresh lenses to his writings and innovations, uncovering new dimensions of his intellectual curiosity and practical ingenuity. Race, justice, and reckoning. Perhaps no issue looms larger in contemporary assessments of Jefferson than his involvement in slavery and its enduring consequences. As movements for racial justice have gained momentum, from the civil rights era of the mid-20th century to the Black Lives Matter protests of the 2010s, Jefferson's complicity in human bondage has come under intense scrutiny. Protesters and activists have called attention to monuments and institutions bearing his name, demanding accountability for the ways in which they perpetuate systemic inequities. At the same time, there is growing recognition of Jefferson's role in articulating principles that continue to inspire struggles for equality. His assertion in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal remains a rallying cry for advocates seeking to dismantle barriers based on race, gender, sexuality, and other identities. Figures such as Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and Angela Davis have invoked Jefferson's words to challenge discriminatory practices and demand policy reforms. In doing so, they underscore the tension between Jefferson's ideals and his actions, a paradox that underscores the ongoing quest for a more just society. Efforts to address this tension have taken many forms. At Monticello, for instance, curators and educators have embraced a more comprehensive approach to interpreting the site's history. Exhibits now highlight the experiences of enslaved workers alongside those of Jefferson and his family, fostering dialogue about the intersections of power, privilege, and resistance. Similarly, initiatives like the Getting Word Oral History Project, launched in 1993, documents the stories of descendants of Monticello's enslaved community, preserving their legacies for future generations. These efforts demonstrate a commitment to reckoning with the past while honoring the humanity of those it often overlooked. Education and innovation. Jefferson's vision for education continues to resonate in an age defined by technological advancement and global interconnectedness. The University of Virginia, which he founded as a beacon of enlightenment, remains one of the nation's leading institutions, consistently ranked among the top universities worldwide. Its emphasis on interdisciplinary collaboration, ethical leadership, and civic responsibility reflects Jefferson's belief in the transformative power of knowledge. Moreover, UVA's commitment to diversity and inclusion aligns with contemporary efforts to expand access to higher education, particularly for historically underrepresented groups. Beyond UVA, Jefferson's influence can be seen in broader trends shaping educational policy. Advocates for public schooling cite his advocacy for universal literacy as a foundation for proposals aimed at closing achievement gaps and promoting lifelong learning. Programs focused on STEM education, vocational training, and digital literacy echo his conviction that education should adapt to meet the needs of a changing world. At the same time, debates over school choice, standardized testing, and teacher accountability reveal ongoing tensions between Jeffersonian ideals of local control and federal oversight. Jefferson's interest in science and innovation also finds echoes in modern endeavors to tackle pressing challenges. His experiments with sustainable agriculture and weather recording anticipate current efforts to combat climate change and promote environmental stewardship. Initiatives like urban farming, renewable energy projects, and conservation programs draw inspiration from his holistic approach to problem solving, emphasizing the importance of balancing progress with sustainability. Furthermore, Jefferson's fascination with technology, from his design of innovative gadgets to his advocacy for infrastructure development, foreshadows today's emphasis on harnessing innovation to improve quality of life. Architecture and civic identity. Jefferson's architectural legacy endures as a testament to his belief in the power of design to shape civic identity and foster democratic values. His neoclassical aesthetic, characterized by symmetry, proportion, and reverence for classical antiquity, continues to influence public buildings, monuments, and urban planning projects around the world. From courthouses and libraries to memorials and museums, Jeffersonian motifs evoke associations with republicanism, transparency, and collective purpose. In recent years, however, architects and planners have begun to question whether these traditional styles adequately represent the diversity and dynamism of modern society. Critics argue that neoclassicism risks reinforcing exclusionary hierarchies by privileging Eurocentric aesthetics over alternative traditions. In response, some designers have sought to incorporate elements of indigenous, African, and Asian architecture into their work, creating hybrid forms that celebrate multiculturalism and inclusivity. Others have embraced minimalist and sustainable approaches, prioritizing functionality and environmental consciousness over ornamental grandeur. Despite these critiques, Jefferson's emphasis on thoughtful design retains its relevance. 3. Projects like the National Museum of African American History and Culture, opened in 2016, demonstrate how architecture can serve as a vehicle for storytelling and reconciliation, blending historical references with contemporary sensibilities. By engaging with Jefferson's legacy in creative and critical ways, architects and planners contribute to ongoing conversations about how physical spaces reflect and sometimes reshape our shared values. Jefferson and global democracy. On the international stage, Jefferson's ideas about governance and human rights have inspired movements for self-determination and social change. Leaders ranging from Mahatma Gandhi to Nelson Mandela have drawn upon his writings to articulate visions of freedom and equality tailored to their respective contexts. Similarly, revolutions in Eastern Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East have echoed Jeffersonian themes of popular sovereignty and resistance to tyranny. At the same time, globalization has exposed the limitations of Jefferson's philosophy, particularly its focus on agrarianism and local autonomy. In an increasingly interconnected world, questions arise about how to balance national sovereignty with transnational cooperation, individual liberties with collective responsibilities. Debates over issues such as immigration, trade, and climate policy highlight the complexities of applying Jeffersonian principles to 21st century challenges, underscoring the need for adaptive thinking and collaborative solutions. A legacy in dialogue. Ultimately, Thomas Jefferson's place in the modern era is defined by dialogue between past and present, idealism and pragmatism, aspiration and accountability. He remains a polarizing figure, yet his contradictions invite us to engage in honest reflection about the forces that have shaped America. Whether viewed as a visionary thinker, a flawed statesman, or something in between, Jefferson reminds us that progress requires both courage and humility, a lesson as vital today as it was 2 centuries ago. Thomas Jefferson's life and legacy serve as a prism through which we can examine the enduring ideals that have shaped and continue to shape the American experiment. His contributions to democracy, individual liberty, education, architecture, and innovation are woven into the fabric of the nation, offering both inspiration and cautionary tales for future generations. This chapter reflects on how Jefferson's core principles, agrarianism, states' rights, separation of church and state, and the pursuit of knowledge remain relevant in contemporary discourse, while acknowledging the ways in which his contradictions challenge us to confront unresolved tensions within our society. Democracy and popular sovereignty. At the heart of Jeffersonian philosophy lies an unwavering belief in the sovereignty of the people. Jefferson envisioned a republic where citizens actively participated in governance, holding leaders accountable and shaping policies that reflected their collective will. This vision of participatory democracy remains foundational to American political culture, informing institutions such as representative government, free elections, and civic engagement. Yet Jefferson's ideal of a little rebellion now and then also underscores the importance of dissent and protest as mechanisms for challenging entrenched power structures, a principle that resonates deeply in movements advocating for social justice today. However, Jefferson's conception of democracy was not without limitations. His emphasis on agrarianism and local autonomy often excluded marginalized groups, particularly urban workers, women, and people of color, from meaningful participation in public life. Moreover, his advocacy for states' rights has been invoked at various points in history to justify resistance to federal authority, sometimes perpetuating systemic inequities rather than addressing them. As modern democracies grapple with issues like voter suppression, gerrymandering, and digital misinformation, Jefferson's ideas about self-governance invite us to consider how best to safeguard democratic processes while ensuring inclusivity and fairness. Liberty and equality. Jefferson's assertion in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal stands as one of the most powerful articulations of human dignity ever written. These words have inspired countless movements for freedom and equality, from abolitionism and suffrage to civil rights and LGBTQ. They remind us that liberty is not merely the absence of oppression, but the presence of opportunity, the ability to live, love, and thrive without artificial barriers based on race, gender, religion, or other identities. Yet Jefferson's personal failure to live up to this ideal complicates its legacy. His ownership of enslaved individuals and his racist views about African Americans expose the gap between rhetoric and reality, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about the origins of American democracy. Contemporary debates over reparations, affirmative action, and systemic racism reflect ongoing efforts to bridge this divide, using Jefferson's contradictions as a lens through which to examine the unfinished work of achieving true equality. In doing so, they honor his aspirations while demanding accountability for his shortcomings. Education and intellectual freedom. Jefferson's commitment to education represents one of his most positive and forward-thinking legacies. He believed that an informed citizenry was essential to the health of a democracy, capable of discerning truth from falsehood and resisting tyranny. This conviction underpins modern initiatives aimed at expanding access to quality education, promoting critical thinking, and fostering lifelong learning. Programs focused on STEM literacy, vocational training, and digital skills echo Jefferson's belief that education should adapt to meet the needs of a changing world. At the same time, controversies over curriculum content, standardized testing, and school funding highlight persistent challenges in realizing Jefferson's vision. Disparities in educational outcomes along racial and socioeconomic lines underscore the need for policies that address structural inequities and ensure equitable access to resources. By engaging with these issues, educators and policymakers contribute to ongoing efforts to build a more inclusive and resilient system, one that empowers all individuals to reach their full potential. Architecture and civic identity. Jefferson's architectural innovations continue to influence the way we design physical spaces to reflect shared values and foster community. His neoclassical aesthetic, characterized by symmetry, proportion, and reverence for classical antiquity, evokes associations with republicanism, transparency, and collective purpose. Public buildings, monuments, and urban planning projects inspired by Jeffersonian motifs serve as reminders of the enduring appeal of beauty and functionality in civic architecture. In recent years, however, architects and planners have begun to question whether traditional styles adequately represent the diversity and dynamism of modern society. Critics argue that neoclassicism risks reinforcing exclusionary hierarchies by privileging Eurocentric aesthetics over alternative traditions. In response, some designers have sought to incorporate elements of indigenous, African, and Asian architecture into their work, creating hybrid forms that celebrate multiculturalism and inclusivity. Others have embraced minimalist and sustainable approaches, prioritizing environmental consciousness over ornamental grandeur. These developments demonstrate how Jefferson's legacy inspires creative reinterpretation, blending historical references with contemporary sensibilities to create spaces that resonate with diverse audiences. Innovation and sustainability. Jefferson's fascination with science and technology anticipated many of the challenges and opportunities facing humanity today. His experiments with sustainable agriculture, weather recording, and innovative gadgets reflect a holistic approach to problem solving that balances progress with stewardship. In an era defined by climate change, resource depletion, and rapid technological advancement, Jefferson's emphasis on sustainability offers valuable lessons about living harmoniously with nature while harnessing innovation to improve quality of life. Initiatives like renewable energy projects, urban farming, and conservation programs draw inspiration from Jefferson's practical ingenuity, emphasizing the importance of collaboration and creativity in addressing complex problems. Similarly, debates over artificial intelligence, data privacy, and ethical leadership highlight the need for frameworks that guide technological development in ways that align with democratic values. By engaging with these issues, scientists, engineers, and policymakers contribute to ongoing efforts to build a more equitable and sustainable future, one that honors Jefferson's curiosity while addressing the realities of the 21st century. Reckoning with contradictions, ultimately, Thomas Jefferson's legacy defies easy categorization. He was a man of extraordinary talent and ambition, whose accomplishments reshaped the course of history. Yet he was also a product of his time, constrained by societal norms and personal biases that clouded his judgment. Recognizing this duality is essential to understanding his impact, not as a static figure frozen in marble, but as a dynamic presence whose contradictions mirror our own struggles to navigate complexity. Today, Jefferson's story invites us to engage in honest dialogue about the forces that have shaped America. It challenges us to confront uncomfortable truths about race, power, and privilege while celebrating the ideals that drive us toward a more inclusive and just society. Whether viewed as a hero, a hypocrite, or something in between, Jefferson reminds us that progress requires both aspiration and accountability. A lesson as vital now as it was 2 centuries ago. Thomas Jefferson's ideas and ideals have transcended the borders of the United States, resonating with leaders, thinkers, and movements across the globe. His vision of liberty, self-governance, and the pursuit of knowledge has inspired revolutions, shaped democratic institutions, and informed debates about human rights and social justice in diverse cultural and political contexts. This chapter explores how Jefferson's legacy extends beyond American shores, examining his influence on international struggles for independence, global education reform, architectural innovation, and the universal quest for freedom. A beacon for revolutionaries, Jefferson's writings, particularly the Declaration of Independence, have served as a blueprint for revolutionary movements around the world. The document's assertion of universal principles, such as the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, has been invoked by individuals and groups seeking to overthrow oppressive regimes and establish more equitable societies. From Latin America to Eastern Europe, Africa to Asia, Jefferson's words have provided both ideological grounding and rhetorical ammunition for those fighting against colonialism, authoritarianism, and inequality. One of the earliest examples of Jefferson's global impact can be found in the independence movements of Latin America during the early 19th century. Leaders such as Simón Bolívar and José de San Martín drew inspiration from Jefferson's advocacy for self-determination and popular sovereignty as they sought to liberate their nations from Spanish rule. Bolívar, often referred to as the George Washington of South America, admired Jefferson's commitment to republicanism and cited his writings in speeches calling for unity and freedom across the continent. Similarly, Brazil's transition from monarchy to republic in the late 19th century echoed Jeffersonian themes of decentralized governance and civic participation. In the 20th century, Jefferson's influence extended to decolonization efforts in Africa and Asia. Figures such as Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and Nelson Mandela embraced his emphasis on nonviolent resistance, grassroots mobilization, and the moral imperative of equality. John D., in particular, viewed Jefferson's Declaration of Human Rights as a precursor to his own philosophy of satyagraha, truth and nonviolence, using it to justify India's struggle for independence from British rule. Likewise, Mandela invoked Jefferson's rhetoric during South Africa's anti-apartheid movement, framing the fight against racial segregation as a continuation of the broader quest for universal dignity and justice. More recently, Jefferson's legacy has surfaced in pro-democracy protests across the Middle East and Eastern Europe. The Arab Spring uprisings of 2010-2012, which toppled dictators in Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya, were fueled by demands for transparency, accountability, and representation, principles rooted in Jeffersonian thought. Similarly, Ukraine's Euromaidan movement in 2014, which challenged Russian-backed authoritarianism, drew explicitly on Enlightenment ideals of individual freedom and collective action. In these instances, Jefferson's vision of participatory democracy continues to inspire ordinary citizens to challenge entrenched power structures and demand greater agency in shaping their futures. Education reform across borders. Jefferson's belief in the transformative power of education has had a profound impact on global efforts to expand access to learning and promote intellectual freedom. His advocacy for public schooling, secular curricula, and critical inquiry has influenced educational policies in countries ranging from France and Germany to Japan and South Korea. Leaders in these nations have looked to Jefferson's example as they seek to build systems that foster creativity, innovation, and civic responsibility. For instance, France's Third Republic 1870-1940 implemented sweeping reforms aimed at creating a meritocratic society through universal education. Inspired by Jefferson's emphasis on reason and enlightenment, policymakers introduced secular schools that prioritized science, history, and literature over religious instruction. These changes laid the groundwork for modern French academia, which remains renowned for its rigorous standards and commitment to intellectual rigor. Similarly, Japan's Meiji Restoration, 1868-1912, incorporated Jeffersonian principles into its push for modernization. establishing public universities and vocational programs designed to equip citizens with the skills needed to compete in an industrialized world. In the post-colonial era, newly independent nations turned to Jefferson's model of education as a means of fostering national identity and economic development. Leaders in Ghana, Kenya, and Indonesia adopted policies promoting literacy, teacher training, and community engagement, viewing education as a tool for empowerment and social mobility. Programs focused on STEM education, women's rights, and environmental sustainability reflect Jefferson's conviction that knowledge should adapt to meet the needs of a changing world. By embracing these ideals, educators and policymakers contribute to ongoing efforts to build more inclusive and resilient systems, one that empowers all individuals to reach their full potential. Architecture and urban planning worldwide. Jefferson's architectural innovations have left an indelible mark on cities and public spaces around the globe. His neoclassical aesthetic, characterized by symmetry, proportion, and reverence for classical antiquity, has influenced everything from government buildings to monuments to urban planning projects. Architects and planners have drawn upon Jeffersonian motifs to create environments that evoke associations with republicanism, transparency, and collective purpose. One notable example is the design of Washington, D.C., which Jefferson helped plan alongside Pierre-Charles L'Enfant. The city's grid layout, grand avenues, and monumental structures have inspired urban designs in capitals worldwide, including Brasilia, Canberra, and New Delhi. These cities reflect Jefferson's belief that physical spaces can shape civic identity and foster pride in shared values. Similarly, landmarks such as the Lincoln Memorial, the Jefferson Memorial, and the National Museum of African American History and Culture pay homage to his architectural sensibilities while celebrating his contributions to the nation. In recent years, architects and planners have begun to reinterpret Jeffersonian principles in ways that reflect contemporary priorities. Projects incorporating sustainable materials, green spaces, and adaptive reuse demonstrate a commitment to balancing beauty with functionality and tradition with innovation. For instance, the redesign of Paris's La Défense district blends modern skyscrapers with classical elements, creating a hybrid form that celebrates multiculturalism and inclusivity. Similarly, initiatives promoting walkable neighborhoods, mixed-use developments, and affordable housing echo Jefferson's vision of communities where people live, work, and thrive together. Human rights and universal values. Perhaps the most enduring aspect of Jefferson's global influence lies in his articulation of universal human rights. His assertion that all men are created equal has become a cornerstone of international law, informing documents such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948 and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights 1966. These frameworks affirm the inherent dignity of every individual, regardless of race, gender, religion, or nationality, and provide a basis for holding governments accountable for violations. At the same time, Jefferson's contradictions have prompted critical reflection on the limits of his vision. His failure to confront slavery and his racist views about African Americans highlight the gap between rhetoric and reality, challenging us to address systemic inequities that persist today. Debates over reparations, affirmative action, and climate justice reflect ongoing efforts to bridge this divide, using Jefferson's paradoxes as a lens through which to examine the unfinished work of achieving true equality. In doing so, they honor his aspirations while demanding accountability for his shortcomings. A legacy without borders. Ultimately, Thomas Jefferson's global influence underscores the universality of his ideals. His vision of democracy, individual liberty, education, architecture, and innovation transcends national boundaries, offering guidance and inspiration to people striving for a better world. Whether viewed as a philosopher-statesman, a flawed visionary, or something in between, Jefferson reminds us that progress requires both courage and humility. a lesson as vital now as it was 2 centuries ago. Thomas Jefferson's life and legacy are not confined to the pages of history. They ripple through the present, shaping our understanding of democracy, justice, innovation, and humanity itself. His story is one of brilliance and contradiction, of soaring ideals tempered by personal failings, and of enduring contributions that continue to inspire while challenging us to confront uncomfortable truths. As we reflect on his multifaceted impact, it becomes clear that Jefferson is not merely a figure of the past, but a living presence, a prism through which we examine who we are and who we aspire to be. The paradox that defines us. Jefferson's contradictions mirror those of America itself, a nation founded on the promise of equality yet built on systems of inequality, a beacon of liberty entangled with legacies of oppression. His authorship of the Declaration of Independence stands as one of the most profound articulations of human dignity ever written. Yet his ownership of enslaved individuals reveals the complexities of translating ideals into action. These paradoxes force us to grapple with difficult questions about power, privilege, and progress, questions that remain as relevant today as they were in Jefferson's time. In confronting these tensions, we find an opportunity for growth. Jefferson's flaws do not diminish his greatness. Rather, they remind us that even the most visionary leaders are products of their era, shaped by biases and limitations that can obscure their vision. By acknowledging these imperfections, we honor the humanity of historical figures while holding them accountable for their choices. This dual approach allows us to celebrate Jefferson's achievements without excusing his complicity in systemic injustices, a balance essential to fostering a more inclusive and equitable society. A vision for the future. Despite his contradictions, Jefferson's core principles offer timeless guidance for addressing contemporary challenges. His belief in participatory democracy underscores the importance of civic engagement, reminding us that self-governance requires active participation and vigilance against tyranny. In an age marked by polarization and distrust in institutions, Jefferson's vision of a republic rooted in dialogue and compromise serves as a call to action, to listen, learn, and work collectively toward common goals. Similarly, Jefferson's emphasis on education as a cornerstone of democracy resonates deeply in an era defined by rapid technological advancement and global interconnectedness. His advocacy for universal literacy, critical thinking, and lifelong learning inspires efforts to expand access to quality education, promote digital skills, and foster environmental stewardship. By embracing these ideals, we equip future generations to navigate complexity and contribute meaningfully to the world. Jefferson's fascination with science and innovation also offers valuable lessons for tackling pressing issues like climate change, resource depletion, and technological ethics. His experiments with sustainable agriculture and weather recording anticipate modern initiatives aimed at balancing progress with sustainability. By drawing upon his practical ingenuity, we can develop solutions that harmonize human needs with planetary health, ensuring a livable future for all. Reckoning with history. Jefferson's legacy invites us to engage in honest reckoning with history, not to erase or romanticize it but to understand its full scope and implications. Efforts to preserve Monticello, document the stories of enslaved workers, and reinterpret public monuments demonstrate a commitment to telling more complete and inclusive narratives. These endeavors challenge us to see beyond marble statues and mythologized portrayals, recognizing the humanity of those whose labor and resilience underpinned Jefferson's achievements. At the same time, debates over how to honor or critique Jefferson's memory reflect broader societal struggles over identity, representation, and accountability. Movements advocating for racial justice, gender equality, and LGBTQ rights draw inspiration from his rhetoric of freedom. while demanding concrete actions to dismantle barriers based on race, gender, religion, and other identities. By engaging with these issues, activists and policymakers contribute to ongoing efforts to build a more just and compassionate society, one that honors Jefferson's aspirations while addressing the realities of systemic inequity. A legacy beyond borders, Jefferson's influence extends far beyond the borders of the United States, resonating with people around the globe who share his commitment to liberty, self-governance, and intellectual freedom. From Latin American independence movements to anti-apartheid protests in South Africa, his ideas have inspired countless struggles for freedom and equality. Today, pro-democracy advocates in nations ranging from Ukraine to Hong Kong invoke Jeffersonian principles to challenge authoritarianism and demand greater agency in shaping their futures. This global resonance underscores the universality of Jefferson's ideals and their adaptability to diverse cultural and political contexts. Whether expressed through neoclassical architecture, secular education systems, or declarations of human rights, Jefferson's vision continues to inspire ordinary citizens to strive for extraordinary change. By engaging with his legacy, we affirm the enduring relevance of his philosophy, while adapting it to meet the needs of an evolving world. An invitation to dialogue. Ultimately, Thomas Jefferson's legacy is an invitation to dialogue, reflection, and action. He reminds us that progress is neither linear nor inevitable. It requires constant effort, courage, and humility. His contradictions challenge us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our society, while his ideals inspire us to imagine a better future. Whether viewed as a hero, a hypocrite, or something in between, Jefferson embodies the complexities of the human condition, a reminder that greatness lies not in perfection, but in the pursuit of improvement. As we move forward, let us carry Jefferson's legacy with both reverence and resolve. Let us celebrate his contributions to democracy, education, and innovation while holding him and ourselves accountable for the work that remains undone. Let us embrace the paradoxes of his life as opportunities for growth, using them to deepen our understanding of justice, equality, and freedom. And let us remember that the quest for a more perfect union is a shared endeavor, one that requires each of us to play a role in shaping the world we wish to inhabit.